Welcome to Wealth Distilled. We squeeze out the fluff and distill complex financial books into pure, 100% proof strategies. Today, you are joining us for a deep dive into the absolute geopolitical reality that sits behind every movie about global corruption you've ever loved.
Our source material is the monumental work of investigative journalist Oliver Bullough in his book Moneyland. If you want to understand how the global elite operate outside the rules, this is your map. Think of it as the travel guide for supervillains and the secret country where the rich hide their trillions.
The idea of a secret country, it sounds totally fictional, right? Like something out of a techno thriller. But this concept of Moneyland, it explains why our beautiful cities, London, New York, Miami, are just flooded with these empty, dark luxury apartments. And it's why our local housing is so absurdly expensive and, why the world's most powerful thieves seem utterly untouchable by any kind of international law.
That is precisely our mission for this deep dive. We are going deep into the concept of this invisible country, Moneyland. We'll understand the legal architecture that allows it to exist right under our noses, and we'll connect its existence directly to global and local inequality.
Okay, let's unpack this immediately, because the core concept, it sounds like a bad guy's lair in a Bond film, yet Bullough defines it as a very real legal space built on a fundamental corrosive mismatch in our global system.
That's the key. It's the simplicity of the structure that makes it so brilliant and, so devastating. Moneyland isn't a fixed place on a map. It is a legal environment, a set of permissive laws.
Okay.
It exists wherever there is a wealthy person who can afford to move money globally, while the laws designed to stop them remain strictly territorial, stuck within national borders.
So laws stop at a line drawn in the sand, but money, if you have enough of it, just flows right over the top of that line.
Exactly. The moneylanders are those who choose which laws to obey and which ones to just ignore. They're nomadic citizens of global wealth. As the source explains, this system allows a person who's corrupt or dishonest to detach their assets from their home jurisdiction.
And that makes those assets legally immune from the consequences of their actions back home.
Precisely.
So let's walk through the kleptocrat's pathway, this infamous steal-hide spend process. If you're a corrupt official who has looted your national treasury, you steal your money in country A.
Right.
You move it and hide it using these anonymous legal structures in country B, and then you spend it in country CA, stable Western city, like London, Geneva, or New York.
And the criminal laws and enforcement agencies of country A simply cannot touch that money once it has crossed the barrier.
That is the basis of Moneyland's immunity.
Yeah.
It's just staggering.
The borders vanish for the money itself, but the laws, the police forces, and the courts remain stuck behind the frontiers. This concept is why the world's worst criminals, the ones who actively loot entire nations, leaving millions in poverty, are able to live lives of permanent, spectacular luxury right in our own cities.
This isn't theoretical. We have to start with the most dramatic example, the trophy case of corruption. Nothing illustrates this pathway better than the 2014 downfall of the former Ukrainian president, Viktor Yanukovych. Everyone suspected corruption, but they didn't understand the scale of it until he fled.
The scene at his Mezihiria palace was truly astonishing. When he fled in February 2014, protesters, journalists, ordinary citizens, they all flocked to this vast compound. It was described in the source as a temple of tastelessness.
A cathedral of kitsch.
Exactly. A vast log cabin stretching across hundreds of acres on the banks of the Dnipro River.
What's so shocking is just this sheer unnecessary excess. It wasn't just big, it was obscenely lavish. You have reports of fountains, massive waterfalls, marble staircases, exotic pheasants just roaming the grounds.
The scale was so vast, it took the revolutionaries days just to explore the entire property.
And the details inside.
Right.
That's what truly defines the Moneyland aesthetic.
Right. They found an Aladdin's cave of golden goods in the garages, including an exquisite Picasso vase of unknown provenance, 14th century icons, display cabinets housing dozens of rifles and pistols, and, in a truly bizarre touch that just screams corrupt excess, a flayed crocodile stuck to a wall.
A flayed crocodile.
Yeah.
That detail makes my blood run cold. It represents a complete and utter disregard for reality when you are that far removed from any kind of accountability.
The emotional reaction from the Ukrainian public who toured this complex was visceral. It was immediate. They saw the cost of corruption in physical, grotesque detail. One person wrote in a comment book, "How much can one man need? Horror. I feel nauseous."
And all this excess was happening while the vast majority of Ukrainians had seen their pensions, their services, their wealth just stagnate for years. And here's the immediate, crucial Moneyland connection that shifts this from a local corruption story to a global scandal. Yanukovych's businesses, his coal mining companies, his Crimean palaces, even that log cabin palace itself, they weren't legally owned in Ukraine.
No, they were legally owned overseas, specifically through a complex web of shell companies registered in the Caribbean. This is the core of the Hyde phase.
So that simple legal maneuver meant that even after the regime collapsed, even with all the outrage and the clear evidence of theft, those stolen assets were legally protected from the people of Ukraine.
And that leads to a horrifying statistic.
Wait, less than 1 cent of every stolen dollar is recovered globally, according to the source. Let's just pause on that for a moment. Less than 1 cent.
That figure confirms the entire global system is, structurally, built to fail the victims. It sends a clear message. Once the corrupt rulers successfully hide their wealth in moneyland, it is essentially gone forever. They can keep their luxury properties in West London, their super yachts, their villas.
Because the mechanism to undo the structure is too slow, too expensive, or just legally impossible.
It's an overwhelming validation of the steal-hide spend process. The risk-reward calculation is completely in favor of the thief. If your risk is recovering less than 1% of the assets, then theft is an extremely high-yield, low-risk business model.
It tells us that the political willpower, or maybe the legal mechanisms, required to fight this theft, they just don't exist yet on a global scale.
They don't. And to understand why they don't, we have to recognize that the blueprint for this entire global infrastructure, this invisible country, didn't start with the modern kleptocrat. We have to look back to the 1960s, specifically the City of London.
Back when the post-war Bretton Woods system began to weaken.
Exactly. Bretton Woods, for listeners who need a quick refresher, was designed after World War II to stabilize the world economy, largely by fixing currencies and strictly limiting the movement of capital across borders.
The idea was to keep taxes high and capital flows controlled to pay for the massive welfare states and infrastructure booms of that era.
But London bankers, feeling constrained by these regulations and eager to compete with Wall Street, started looking for loopholes. They found one. If they conducted transactions in dollars outside the United States, U.S. regulators couldn't touch them.
And British regulators, who were eager for the business, just looked the other way.
Pretty much. And this gave birth to Eurodollars. Sounds technical, but it's a foundational concept for Moneyland. They were dollars physically present in London, used for loans and deposits, but they were legally stateless.
Stateless, so they avoided U.S. regulation.
Right, which meant banks could operate on razor-thin margins and offer higher interest rates. This immediately attracted vast pools of money looking for a regulatory holiday. It was highly profitable for the banks, and this practice quickly became known as offshore finance.
That is the start of the core concept that defines Moneyland. Being legally absent while remaining physically present. You can be standing in the City of London, but your money is legally registered in the Bahamas.
The source uses a perfect, illuminating analogy from the time: the offshore pirate radio stations. In the 60s, they moored ships just outside Britain's territorial waters to broadcast pop music.
So they were physically present, you could tune in, but legally absent from the jurisdiction of UK authorities.
The exact same phenomenon. Financial transactions were called offshore to describe this, physically conducted in the City of London, but legally they were elsewhere, where rules did not apply.
This seems like such a small step, just a regulatory nuance, but it opened the floodgates.
It was a massive philosophical and legal shift. Without this acceptance that money could be physically present in a major financial capital, yet legally treated as being elsewhere, Moneyland could never have been conceived, let alone built into a global system.
And then came the first true magic trick, the key to mobilizing that wealth: bearer bonds, specifically Eurobonds.
This was the first practical tool of anonymity. London bankers invented these certificates, anonymous, tax-free, interest-paying pieces of paper. And crucially, there was no register of ownership. Whoever physically possessed the piece of paper owned the asset.
So it's basically a $1,000 interest-paying traveler's check that could be redeemed anywhere, in any currency. That is wealth in its purest, most mobile form. You could put millions in a briefcase and walk across any border completely untraced.
Precisely. And Ian Fraser, the banker involved in creating them, understood exactly who his target market was. He noted the main buyers were individuals, often from regions with political instability, Eastern Europe, Latin America, who needed a mobile form of wealth to flee quickly.
We're talking about Latin American dictators or people escaping political persecution.
Exactly. And of course, the standard tax avoiders, who the bankers colorfully called the Belgian dentists, high-earning professionals steering money to Luxembourg or Geneva to minimize their tax burden back home.
And that's the critical moment. The door to Moneyland's magic garden opened, and first-world tax avoiders and third-world kleptocrats began sharing the exact same anonymous legal space.
That is profoundly unsettling, because it means the tools and structures used by a dentist to avoid paying his fair share of income tax are identical to those used by a dictator looting billions from his own people.
It makes it exponentially harder for us to deal with Moneyland when our own citizens, our own professionals, are using the exact same mechanisms as the world's most notorious criminals. The system of impunity is built from our own backyard.
And that shared space, that common interest in anonymity, takes us right into the hide phase and the very architecture of invisibility. Today, that wealth is made anonymous through the humble but incredibly insidious shell company.
I think most people have heard the term shell company, but what exactly is it and why is it so effective?
A shell company is a legal fiction. It's a corporation that usually has no employees, no substantial physical presence, and performs no real economic activity. Its entire purpose is to be an invisible shield.
A shield for what?
A shield for the beneficial owner. That's the most important term we need to grasp here.
The beneficial owner, that's the real person behind it all.
Absolutely. The flesh and blood individual who ultimately controls the company and benefits from the assets held within it. The shell company's job is to ensure that name is never, ever revealed. It protects assets from investigation, confiscation, and transparency demands.
I love Bolo's visceral analogy for this because it makes the concept so concrete. It's like wrapping a dog turd in multiple plastic bags. If the last bag, the one on the outside, says Tiffany & Co., no one looks inside.
It's about manufacturing respectability through layers of increasingly prestigious corporate structures, even if the core asset is utterly rotten. And that layering is incredibly effective because it relies on that territorial mismatch.
So you have a long, nested chain of companies across multiple jurisdictions, Nevis, Cyprus, London, Liechtenstein, and it's all designed to just baffle investigators.
Exactly. Every layer adds months to an investigation, demanding a new legal request in a new country.
For the investigators on the front lines, what difference would simply knowing that one name, the beneficial owner, make?
It would be revolutionary. One Homeland Security agent said knowing the beneficial owner would cut the investigative time by half. Think about that. That is an enormous time saving.
So by the time they untangle the web, the statute of limitations has run out.
Often, yes. The crime doesn't die because the thief got away. It dies because the identity was hidden for too long. The system weaponizes bureaucracy against justice.
And who is responsible for providing all those plastic bags and maintaining those impenetrable layers? We move now from the villains who steal the money to the people who enable them and profit immensely.
The pinstripe army.
These are not cartoon villains wearing eye patches. These are boring professional individuals, lawyers, accountants, bankers, who exploit these legal mismatches from within our own Western financial capitals.
They are the quiet engine of Moneyland. They move this money, hide it, and make it look legitimate, collecting huge fees along the way. The sheer moral hypocrisy of the system is the point.
They use the legitimacy of our systems against us.
And the ultimate physical expression of the Pinstripe Army's work is the post box address. Let's talk about the bizarre concentration of corporate power at 29 Harley Street, London.
A prestigious address known for eminent doctors and specialists.
But instead of health specialists, in 2016, 29 Harley Street, a single stately terraced house, was the registered address for over 2,157 companies.
2,000 companies in one house.
It was essentially a postbox for a company called Formations House, which creates and registers shell companies on an industrial scale. This address, in the very heart of prestigious London, gave a respectable gloss to what was essentially wholesale identity concealment and fraud.
And we saw Yanukovych's empire using this exact mechanism. His luxurious forest mansion in Ukraine was owned by a Ukrainian company, which was owned by Astute Partners Ltd., registered at 29 Harley Street.
And that company in turn was owned by another company, Blythe Europe Ltd., also registered there. The ultimate shareholder was only traceable to Liechtenstein, a jurisdiction that doesn't reveal beneficial ownership.
The entire chain, which obscured ownership and protected the assets, began in the very heart of London. The prestige of the address, the Tiffany & Company bag lends credibility to utter fiction.
And this prestige is immediately weaponized, as seen in the S&N advanced fee fraud. This was a case where fraudsters in Las Vegas set up an empty shell company called S&N, invented a fake persona, Sir Richard Benson, played by an actor, and used the prestige of 29 Harley Street to scam victims.
They sent out glossy booklets, convincing victims to send hundreds of thousands of dollars in advance fees to access promised loans that never materialized.
The address was S&N's only real asset, its foundation of legitimacy. It's an infrastructure that continues to serve corruption long after individual thieves are caught.
Now let's talk about how jurisdictions actively compete to offer the best anonymity package. We shift our focus to the island of Nevis, the ultimate everything haven.
Nevis in the Caribbean is a miniature exemplar of the dozens of jurisdictions servicing moneyland. It's much more than just a tax haven. Its primary product is radical asset protection.
Asset protection sounds like a good thing, but what does it really mean in the context of moneyland?
It means that money hidden there is safe from many elements of civil law. Most importantly, divorce settlements, lawsuits, and creditors. It's an explicit mechanism to allow wealthy people to opt out of the financial responsibilities that the rest of us face.
So if a wealthy business owner is facing massive litigation or going through a contentious divorce, they can just move their assets into a Nevis trust, and legally, that money is untouchable.
That's the core pitch. And the truly insidious part of Nevis's system is that American lawyers often write the legislation for Nevis, specifically to benefit their clients back in the U.S.
A purely transactional relationship.
The cost of pursuing justice-flying lawyers to the Caribbean battling complex trusts simply exceeds the value of the claim for all but the wealthiest litigants.
It sounds like the legal industry has created a system that is literally trillions of dollars large, dedicated entirely to screwing legitimate creditors out of collecting legitimate debt.
It is exactly that. And just like with the Eurobonds, the naughty money of asset protection mixes immediately with the evil money of true corruption.
Give us some examples of the true evil money hiding in Nevis.
In every complex international scam, you find a jurisdiction like Nevis playing a role. Navinder Sarao, the British day trader convicted for his role in the 2010 flash crash, diverted his enormous profits into 2 Nevis-registered trusts.
Wow.
An $80 million yacht purchased by a Nigerian embezzler used Nevis companies to obscure ownership from Nigerian authorities. And then, of course, the Russian laundromat.
The scheme that moved billions out of Russia.
Estimated between $20 and $80 billion, the scheme utilized Latvian bank accounts, which were eventually owned by dozens of companies registered in Nevis. The money flowed through Moldova into Latvia and then was distributed globally.
Wait, so the money went from Russia to Moldova to Latvia to London. My head is spinning just trying to track the shell companies that own the bank accounts that own the assets. How is anyone supposed to track this flow? Right.
Sounds
like you need a flow chart just to keep up.
It's absolutely designed to be confusing. That's the point. The complexity is the defense mechanism itself. Frankly, Oliver Bullough writes this entire analysis like a spy novel, chronicling the layers of these schemes and naming the jurisdictions. You need the physical book to really track the flow of these operations, flipping back and forth. I keep it on my shelf as a reminder of how the world really works. It's the most terrifying nonfiction book you'll ever buy.
It sounds essential for understanding modern geopolitics. We move now into the spend phase, because the ultimate outcome of the moneyland system is that its citizens buy freedom from the normal constraints the rest of us face.
Moneyland buys its citizens absolute global mobility and total security.
We'll talk about passports for sale. Citizenship as a commodity. This has exploded into a global industry.
Places like St. Kitts and Nevis, Malta, and Cyprus sell golden passports. For an investment, usually hundreds of thousands of dollars, you instantly get citizenship, which grants incredible privileges like visa-free travel throughout the EU.
For the wealthy, this means citizenship is entirely severed from loyalty, from community, from civic duty. It is a purely transactional commodity used to bypass restrictions.
And often this is used for nefarious purposes. The EU has become concerned about criminals buying Maltese citizenship to gain unfettered access to all member states.
But the source also provides an incredibly poignant example showing the duality of this system. The story of Kamal Shahada, the Palestinian civil engineer.
Shahada's lack of a proper Palestinian passport plagued him for decades, restricting his ability to travel and work. He ultimately raised the funds to buy passports for his children from St. Kitts and Dominica.
This instantly granted his children the freedom to travel throughout the British Commonwealth and the European Union, advantages that 99% of Palestinians could only dream of.
He bought his family's way out of ingrained injustices that the world's slow diplomatic processes failed to fix. Freedom is just another asset class.
Now, let's turn to the impact that hits closest to home for listeners in the US and UK. The way Moneyland treats our cities, specifically Londongrad and Manhattan, as safety deposit boxes.
This is where global corruption manifests as local societal devastation. Luxury real estate in London, New York, and Miami is no longer primarily housing. It's a global currency, a stable store of wealth for flight capital.
That explains the ghost mansions. The property just sits there, empty, appreciating in value, owned by an anonymous shell company.
The Russian influx into London, starting in the early 1990s, is the textbook case. The money poured in and property prices soared dramatically. The source notes that between 1995 and 2017, the average price for a property in Kensington and Chelsea rose from £180,000 to over $1.5 million.
A tenfold increase. That's not sustainable organic growth. That's capital flight distorting an entire housing market. And who pays the price? The locals, the nurses, the teachers. Wealthy foreigners transformed much of West London into a place few Brits could ever afford to live in.
This creates what Citigroup analysts called a plutonomy, where the wealthy have a disproportionate share of assets, driving global growth through their spending, but largely isolated from the economic malaise of the majority.
So this luxury spending is a self-perpetuating cycle, and our cities are its playground. The rich get richer, and they buy more luxury real estate, further squeezing everyone else out of the housing market.
And for the ultimate physical manifestation of Moneyland becoming a real, defended place, we have the terrifying example of Indian Creek in Miami.
This is where wealth literally buys a private state.
Indian Creek is an island that is essentially a $37 billion moated community accessible by a single guarded bridge. It has a population of only 86 people, yet its police force consists of 10 full-time officers plus 4 reserves.
A police officer to resident ratio of about 1 to 5. That's unbelievable. My city barely manages 1 to 400.
They run a 247 Marine Patrol unit around the island perimeter, armed and dedicated to protecting the residents. It is the definition of private governance, totally insulated from the external world.
And if they don't want to buy an island, the ultimate act of buying immunity, the final level of Moneyland defense, is something truly sinister. Diplomatic immunity.
This came up famously in the case of Saudi billionaire Walid al-Jufali. After divorcing his supermodel wife, Christina Estrada, he married a much younger model.
I remember this case. When Estrada's lawyers sought a fair divorce settlement in London, al-Jufali deployed an unbelievable defense.
He claimed diplomatic immunity because he had purchased an official title. He was an ambassador for the tiny Caribbean island nation of St. Lucia to the International Maritime Organization in London.
So he literally bought a title from a cash-hungry small country solely to shield himself from legal proceedings in the UK. That means the wealth not only allows them to avoid criminal law, but basic civil responsibility as well.
And that's the truly chilling implication. As the source describes, a wealthy person can purchase ambassadorial status before arriving in a Western city, thereby gaining total immunity from prosecution for virtually any crime, civil or criminal. It's a gold-plated, get-it-out-of-jail-free card.
A solicitor involved in the case said he struggled to think of any more cowardly abuse of the mighty institution that is diplomatic immunity. This shows where the last hurdle is for any determined moneylender seeking ultimate untouchability.
And that hurdle can be purchased for a fee. The ability to leverage the legal prestige of Western institutions against our own citizens is the true genius of Moneyland.
So, we have established the problem in excruciating, terrifying detail. How do we take it back?
The consensus among investigators and anti-corruption activists is that the key, the single biggest point of attack, is transparency. We must find a way to end anonymity.
Which means exposing the beneficial owner.
Precisely. Knowing the true beneficial owner of a shell company would, as we heard earlier, cut the investigative time by half. That time saving is everything.
And there is some movement on this front, thankfully.
Yes. The UK is slowly moving toward a person with significant control register, making companies disclose who truly owns them. Even its secretive offshore territories are reluctantly agreeing to open ownership registries. Sunlight is the best disinfectant.
But the forces protecting Moneyland are fighting back hard, using every tool at their disposal. One of their most effective weapons, particularly in the UK, is the aggressive use of English libel law.
London has long been known as the libel capital of the world. Its tough libel laws traditionally require the publisher, not the plaintiff, to prove the truth of what they're saying. Wealthy foreigners use this law as a devastating weapon of intimidation.
It's institutionalized self-censorship out of sheer financial terror. A publication might know their story is 100% true, but the cost of defending it against a motivated billionaire oligarch is simply too high.
The source cites the example of a prestigious publication that killed a meticulously researched story about a Ukrainian oligarch. The story was solid, but the publisher feared being bankrupted by a speculative lawsuit, a SLAPP suit, even if they ultimately won the case.
The oligarch simply has infinite money to throw at a lawsuit, whereas the publication has limited resources. It's a battle of attrition designed to silence criticism.
The most famous example is the case of Karen Dawish's book, Putin's Kleptocracy: Who Owns Russia? Her prestigious publisher, Cambridge University Press, dropped the book due to the perceived legal risk in the UK.
Why?
The executive publisher admitted the decision had nothing to do with the quality of the research, but was purely a question of risk tolerance. They feared the cost of defending against a highly motivated, wealthy circle of oligarchs.
And the specific legal hurdle they cited was that since the insiders in the book had never been convicted of a crime, because the Russian legal system is corrupt and protects them, it was impossible to definitively defend the claims in the UK courts.
This is how the system shields itself. This industry of PR agencies and law firms creates a massive, expensive, protective force field around stolen wealth, making these individuals unkillable and unwrite-about-armable.
That is truly the corruption of our own systems. But perhaps the most shocking development in the global war on secrecy is the emergence of tax haven USA, the new moneyland stronghold.
The irony here is almost unbelievable. The U.S. was the country that globally championed transparency and broke the back of Swiss bank secrecy through the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, or FATCA.
Right. FATCA forces banks around the world to report on assets held by U.S. citizens.
Correct. But then the rest of the world agreed to a subsequent global standard called the Common Reporting Standard, or CRS. Under CRS, countries automatically swap information about assets held in their banks.
But the U.S. is not a signatory to CRS.
Precisely. And uniquely, FATCA works one way. Foreign institutions must report vast amounts of data to the U.S., but U.S. institutions don't have to send anything back in return about foreign accounts held domestically.
I get it. So the U.S. is only willing to accept records, not send any back. It becomes the safest house on the street for anyone who wants to hide.
That's the perfect analogy. The U.S. maintains a unique competitive advantage. A massive, sanctioned information black hole in the very heart of the world's new financial architecture.
So if you're a rich Chinese businessman, a Russian official, or anyone with something to hide, and you know information is now flowing back to your home country from Switzerland, where do you move your money for ultimate protection?
You move it to the U.S. Money is now rushing to the USA to avoid reporting under CRS.
And what parts of the U.S. are actively competing for this dirty money?
States like Nevada, South Dakota, Delaware, and Wyoming have optimized their local trust laws to attract foreign wealth. They offer anonymous dynasty trusts and incredibly permissive asset protection laws. Nevada trusts can last for up to 365 years.
Nearly 4 centuries of legal anonymity and tax avoidance. And what about asset protection for those running from creditors?
This is the real draw. In states like Nevada and South Dakota, after a relatively short 2-year window, your creditors have virtually no way of getting the assets you put into a trust.
So the money parked there is legally immune to foreign tax authorities, divorce lawyers, and creditors.
And the numbers confirm the strategy is working. In South Dakota alone, the amount of money held in these trusts rose from $32.8 billion in 2006 to a whopping $226 billion by 2016.
That's hundreds of millions of dollars for every resident of this prairie tax haven, all sourced from international flight capital.
And this continues because there is simply no political appetite to force the U.S. to comply with global standards. As one prime minister of a Caribbean tax haven put it, that giant sucking sound you hear is money rushing to the USA.
It confirms the system is not failing. It's working exactly as designed by the people who have the wealth to write the rules.
And that brings us to the ultimate heartbreaking cost of moneyland: the preservation of kleptocracy. The global system actively rewards those who steal and severely punishes those who try to expose it.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The use of violence to maintain secrecy. The ultimate defense of moneyland isn't a complex legal brief. It is murder, executed with chilling precision.
The assassination of Alexander Litvinenko with polonium-210 in London in 2006, according to the public inquiry, was not simply political revenge. It was likely ordered to prevent him from revealing the deep money trail of the Russian kleptocracy.
Litvinenko, an ex-FSB officer, had sent a report detailing specific financial scams used by the Kremlin elite to the man who ultimately poisoned him right before the killing. The timing is just too striking.
The logic for the moneylender is terrifyingly effective. If a whistleblower threatens to expose the financial trail, the specific names, dates, and account numbers, they eliminate the witness in a foreign country. Then their home country protects the assassins behind borders that Western police cannot cross. The money remains safe.
If a moneylender is ruthless enough to kill any potential witnesses against him, he can keep his fortune safe forever. Violence is the ultimate moneyland defense. So as you look around your community, look at the most expensive empty house in your city, or that new, absurdly expensive condo tower that seems permanently dark. Do you think a local family owns it? Or is it just a shell company from Moneyland, registered through Harley Street, a Nevada dynasty trust, or a diplomatic passport loophole, sitting there, appreciating, safe from any law enforcement in the world? Give us your conspiracy theories in the comments.
This is the hidden architecture that drives so much of our global political and economic friction. It is the story of how wealth can successfully detach itself from the obligations of society.
That's the distilled wisdom for today.
If you want more high-proof financial insights, subscribe to Wealth Distilled.
Catch you in the next deep dive.